Hi, everybody. This is Chris.
And Al. I forgot that I
As is tradition, every guest is like, "Oh, wait, this is me." Yeah, and we're gonna hear talking about your game Skald against the Black Priory. Is is it the whole name, or do you like people just saying Skald? Or
Well, no, it's absolutely the whole name, but we definitely use Skald as
okay,
shorthand, the way you would do for Ultima or whatever. It's yeah, so
right,
we don't always say the full name, but the title of the game is Skald: Against the Black
Black Priory,
Priory. So
perfect.
there you go.
Yeah, gives you a little lead in to know what you're doing too, so you're not like, "Well, what's this game? Apparently, there's a Black Priory, and I need to be against it."
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's against it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So, as I kind of gave you a little brief before we started, but for everyone watching, where can they find out about it? Where can they follow you? Where can they all these things?
Yeah. So first of all, I would just like to say thank you for having me on, Chris. It's really cool to be able to interact with you.
I'm glad we finally can.
Yeah, exactly. We've hung out on Twitter for a number of years, and you've
Hmm.
always been a big supporter of the project. So it's really cool to finally be able to.
Yeah,
I would say face to face, but it's not necessarily it. But you know what I mean.
face-ish, face-ish.
Yeah, exactly. More or less in real time, at least.
Yeah, uh,
Yeah.
about all we
So
get nowadays. So,
yeah, exactly. No, but the game is under development. It's still in
mhm.
development, and when it launches, you'll be able to get it on Steam, GOG, and itch.io.
Okay,
Currently, there is a demo both on Steam and on GOG, but the demo on Steam tends to be more current. So, usually recommend people go look at it there, and you also I would really appreciate if people wishlist the game. It's a huge deal for getting marketing momentum and stuff like that. So you can find the game there. Um, there is a demo there now, which is quite old. But like as we are talking now, within a couple of days from recording this, we will hopefully be updating the demo to something that is more representative to the current version of the game.
right. I know we talked about that when we were setting this up because I have played through the demo and I liked what I've seen so far, but I have also, like you said, for years watched it evolve and watched things like the
Yeah.
combat change and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah, and this is sort of the final iteration. It's still very much the same game as you've seen, but there's a lot of refinement going into like the final stages of the game, especially into making things like combat feel better, like
Hmm.
more mature, and also hold on, let me just get a window. So there
No,
we
no
go.
problem.
And also stuff like having like character development be the way we want it to be in the final game, and that would be in the last version of the demo. So even though the demo is short, it's shorter than what we have now. It's more like a teaser for the game
Okay.
because the game is close to launch now. Unless there is some really bad force majeure stuff, that like the game is fairly close to launch. We haven't revealed the launch date, but
Right.
it's closer than some people might think.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, and you will know when we reveal it because we will reveal it with a bang. But yeah, so to circle back, like the demo we want to have out for the last couple of months before the game launches is we want it to be fairly short, more representative of what the final game is like,
Mhm.
and so just keep your eyes peeled, and
Yeah.
suddenly there will be a new demo.
Yeah, that'll be great. And I don't think we mentioned this yet, but for those who are interested, it is a CRPG in a, you know what? I'm not even going to say it. What would you say the games are that influenced this style of game? What would you be your like top two or three?
Yeah, so just to do like the elevator pitch thing, Skald is basically a CRPG that is made to feel like it was made 30 years ago, but that secretly is really a quite modern RPG. It has
Yeah.
all the modern conveniences, but still the play experience, the graphical expression, seems like the way we remember the games from the 90s. Now, it is in fact quite a bit more sophisticated, like graphically and stuff, than games actually were in 1990 or 1988 or whatever.
Right.
So obviously we have all the modern conveniences available in terms of tools and processing power and stuff, but it's definitely a game that is quite heavily inspired by both the Ultima games, especially like from Ultima 4 up to Ultima 2, up to and including Ultima 7, and also I would say maybe the Gold Box series, the D&D game, like the Curse of the Azure Bomb, and those kind of games is a pretty big influence. Wasteland 1 is a pretty big influence, and you'll be able to tell that by looking at like the graphical presentation of the game as well, I think. But
yeah. No, I definitely felt that gold box vibe from like the character sprites. Like it really brought that in and showed that. So
but obviously it's one of those things where we've kind of been leaning a little bit more towards slightly higher fidelity. When the project started, the game was even more kind of dug in on being a more true representation of 1990. But I think and then since then it's sort of been a quest of trying to find where can we push the graphical expression without going off the trail, which is sort of the concept for the project. Because obviously you could call it a gimmick, and to a degree it is a gimmick, but there's also something artistic about choosing a set of constraints and trying to work within them. So
and I mean, I'm the first one to say nostalgia is a hell of a drug, and getting that little vibe of it come back to you and be like, this feels like home. It feels like something I did all those years ago.
That is absolutely something we hear from a lot of people who have tried the game and the demo, and it's also sort of the best feedback or maybe not the best in terms of like, it's certainly what I enjoy the most hearing from people who play the game, is that like, and especially it's fun when people say that like this is giving me nostalgia for something I didn't almost even experience.
Right.
The real thing.
Right.
And there's a lot of that going on, I think, in this project, which is fine, which is cool, I think.
Is there anything with this, because when you're doing one of these nostalgia projects, like you said, it's kind of hard to balance modern convenience and that vibe of what it used to be. What do you think? It's sort of a two-part question. It's two sides of it. What do you think the most nostalgia powerful thing is right now in Skald, if it's like a graphic or a game mechanic or something like that? And what is a mechanic you absolutely just, we're not bringing that over, that can stay in the past and die?
I think for the most part, I think like the graphical presentation and the implications that it has for like stuff like UI design and how the game plays is obviously the most what clearly flags the game as a nostalgia project. And then that also leads into sort of the tile-based nature of how the world is designed, which is also something you don't necessarily always see anymore. The game is sort of tile-based both in and out of combat. It's turn-based both in and out of combat. Like it has a very sort of clockwork feel, which is when you kind of examine a lot of turn-based games today, even turn-based RPGs, a lot of them aren't really tile-based anymore. So it's one of those things that when you think about it, it's not as common as you would actually think it.
No, and it is something I desperately miss. I like that tile-based chunky movement thing. I don't.
Absolutely, and it's also something that inspires the art of the game quite a lot. I would say that that's probably one of the biggest things where we have been sort of making a move towards adding more and more assets that are not necessarily built out of tiles, so to speak. They're still built out of tile sets, but we don't really have any constraints in terms of memory. So what we can do in some cases is that we could have done it in all of the game, but we have to kind of be a little bit like conservative. So what we do is that for some certain areas we will draw out an object and then we will just cut it into tiles and move all the tiles into the editor. So but there is also a lot of a content or like level design, level content that is made just by like having a randomized brush of floor tiles and then placing them out. And the thing is that I think we're always looking for the level where there is enough repetition to have you like actually appreciate that this is a tile-based world.
Right.
But there is also not so much repetition that it looks grating, which is a very strange balancing act. And it's funny that you bring it up because it's something that me and one of the artists I have, we were discussing it like even just today, like the sort of this thing where there's some kind of graphical design challenge going on there, which is I think is immensely enjoyable and goes a long way towards making the game feel like authentically retro.
What?
But when it comes to
Sorry, go on.
no, I was just going to say when it comes to like what feature are we very happy to throw out with the bathwater?
Yeah.
It's more difficult because I think it comes more down to not necessarily single features. It comes more down to which features didn't exist earlier, and but that we are now putting in, and that again comes down to some of it is technical constraints, and some of it is like more design ethos. And I think one of the things we have to be more conservative about, or like more careful with now than designers used to, is actually like the thing about respecting player time, because players have less time to play games, and the game can't be so obtuse that players have to like, what's going, where do I go? Like there needs to be some, I won't say hand holding, because this isn't a particularly hand holdy game, but you need to be able to save whenever, wherever. You should probably have some kind of log system that keeps a journal for you, because like as romantic as it is to do handwritten notes, most people don't really. Looking at our whole demographic, like our demographic as a whole, there is a very small subset that really enjoy note taking. There's a lot of that stuff that needs to go into a modern game, because people expect, I think they will easily bounce from the project if it's not there. So we spend a lot of time doing quality of life stuff. Inventory management is one of those things where we can do a lot more. No, obvious, like, or not just we, but we as in game designers of a whole, we have learned a lot about UI design, and we're also able to do it mouse driven, so we don't have to, because that's one of those things I really dislike about going back and playing Ultima 4 is the whole inventory management thing through the keyboard.
Most old games inventory is just atrocious.
Pooling gold, distributing gold, pooling items, distributing items, buying with one character, moving it to another, equipping it. I forgot to unequip first, then so that's one of those things where we just streamline it.
All us gamers truly appreciate it. Speaking of respecting player time, this is a question I think used to get asked a lot more and still semi-important, but how long do you think someone coming to the game for the first time will take to finish it? On average, not one of the speed runners, not somebody who hacks it.
That's one of those things that is extremely difficult to answer with role-playing games, because role-playing games are by their nature so open-ended. So I'm almost because I don't want to say a set time, because if I do it, we're kind of committing to it. Like, and then what if it's less? And so it's so difficult to say, but it will be in the tens of hours. There is something going on in development where it will be less sort of grand scale than was originally conceived, but that has to do with the fact that the quality of the assets is so much higher than we had originally thought. Like, text and dialogue and branching is quite complex, so it's a very dense game. And originally, like the plan when I started the game was that, maybe it should be something like the Ultimate games where you play on like a continent-sized landmass. But the thing when you play, for instance, and that works beautifully for a lot of these games, but there needs to be some kind of it would be difficult to tell a story that spanned a landmass, because since we have higher fidelity, it would be very clear that okay, this city is starting to look a lot like this city, is starting to look a lot like this city. Like so what we have to do, we have to kind of constrain it more to a region where it's like, yeah, this is sort of like this microcosmos where we have like the people here have a way of dressing, they have a way of talking, they have a given culture. Like we would have to do, we would have had to do a lot more work and make it so thinly spread if it was larger. So we're kind of making it more condensed, like a good old chunky role playing game module that's sort of
Yeah.
set around central hub area and stuff like that.
Well, that's
But I would say the gameplay, just to finish it, the gameplay will obviously be tens and dozens of hours. And we know that like we had the previous demo that used to be up, the one, not the one now, the one before that, the one that was basically a standalone application on Steam. We had people who were playing it for 20 plus hours, and that demo was intended to last for 40 minutes. So
that sounds right.
yeah. Like there is a lot of room for you to just get lost in the game if you want to, but you can also do it quite succinctly.
Yeah, especially when you've got like a narrow demo, you're gonna explore all of it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna miss a corner because I want to dig everything I can out of it. No, and
there's also
sorry.
No, but there's also a thing where, because the game is quite text heavy, there is also a thing where when you're playing it for the first time, you are more likely reading more of the text. For instance, now when I played Baldur's Gate 1, which is one of my all-time favorites game I have played so many times, like I usually don't read the text anymore. I know exactly, like there's a 1-1-2-1, go, finish.
I know what I want to say to this person.
Exactly. And the moment you start having that experience with Skald, the game becomes half as long, because then you're not reading stuff anymore. And so
And I'm presuming, based on how I've seen it and what you just said about Baldur's Gate, you prefer that like dialogue tree as opposed to text parser.
Yeah, we could have gone both ways. Obviously, we could have done text parser, but one of the things that we kind of really at the start of the game, one of the things that we wanted to, or I wanted to do with this project, was to have it be at least have the opportunity to tell sort of more of a conventional modern fantasy story. Like I didn't want to be constrained by having to use a text parser or having like a very limited number of characters on the screen. So we have a branching dialogue system that allows us to do almost more of this like choose your own adventure type story, which is because it's not only used for dialogue, it's also used for a lot of the things where you interact with the world, where we have to kind of we have to hand script something. In many cases, that's usually like doing like this choose your own adventure path thing. So we went with that. We could have gone text parser, but that would have become a different game. I think it would lend itself more to kind of a different style of design than Skald is currently. So maybe for a future project, who knows? I'm a fan of the idea too. So.
I always have such mixed feelings on it, because on one hand, I love the feeling of freedom that the text parser comes, but I also know, like, I'm replaying Ultima 4 right now, and I just walk in and go, Jobstone, Rune.
Exactly.
And I'm like, I'm just still, I mean, it's not too different from a tree of some sort, so.
No, and then there's also, there's also the thing where if you have text parser, if you know what to ask a certain character, you can sort of bypass parts of the game, and that needs to be an intended part of the design. Like you need to account for that. If that's fine, that's something you're fine with as a designer, then absolutely no problem. But if it's not, then it's a little bit wonky to work around. So that means that if you have a story where the narrative is kind of like, it doesn't even have to be linear, but where the narrative is where it's set. In a game like Ultima, it's basically like a sandbox, and you have to solve the different parts of that narrative in whatever order. Like you have to do all of these quests, and you can do it in any order, and once you've done them all, then you can kind of finish the game. And that's when the text parser works really well. But a game like Skald, it wouldn't really work. It would have to be a completely different game.
Well, with the text parser and that being an important part of it, how important is it for players to kind of learn the lore of the world, or is it just sort of extra dressing for those people who want to dig deeper?
So that's a good question. I try to. I would say that like the lore of the world is not necessarily like the game is more character driven than it is driven by. It's definitely like a grim dark fantasy thing, which means that it's more driven by the characters and their psychology than like the lore of the world per se. And it's not necessarily puzzly in the way that you have to kind of like learn the 7 locations of the 7 amulets and like
Right.
that's not really a thing, but it's definitely a game where we try to flesh out the world quite a bit with sort of this environmental storytelling and like. But I'm a big fan in my world building and in like as a both as like a tabletop DM and also as a game designer and a game consumer. I tend to prefer when the lore of the world is something that you kind of soak up as you progress through the game.
What? Yeah. What would be your favorite tabletop setting? There's a question.
I've always made my own, which is a big part of the reason why I'm a game developer today.
Yeah.
So that's always been, and but I would say I'm partial to. I've definitely played most fantasy,
Hmm.
and when I was younger, I would we played a lot of second and third edition D&D. So there was a lot of like standard fantasy there, and I still tend to default back to it, and it tends to be some version of some kind of grim dark fantasy thing. I'm currently huge into, or not huge into, because I don't really have time to play role playing. When I
I
play now,
feel
I
you.
play. Yeah. When I play now, I play an indie tabletop RPG called Shadow Dark,
Okay.
which is sort of a re-edition of first edition D&D, but with more third or fifth edition rule mechanics. But very lightweight, very fast, very deadly, very sort of unforgiving. Like first edition D&D style, old school Renaissance style
Yeah.
tabletop, and I like that. I enjoy that immensely.
Yeah. I've been meaning to
But
pick that one up. It looks good. So
it's
glad to
really good,
hear.
and you can get a free player's guide on their homepage, or like a player's starter book, and
Hmm.
that's really all you need. You don't need anything else because it's so lightweight.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to give that a check out. Here's a question. Like, and I know, like, for me as a like world builder myself, I've got so many campaign worlds just laying dead in folders somewhere. But
Yeah.
when when would you say you first started working on Skald as it is today? Like the first, I'm gonna write this world. Maybe it was for a tabletop. Maybe it was just fun. Maybe how long ago?
So I would say that the game that the world that the game is set in is very directly based on a world that we ran a very long RPG like D&D third edition campaign in, and that's basically 15 years ago. It was when I was in university. We had like a very stable group that we played very
Mm-hmm.
regular, and I was DM, and we played for like a couple of years, which is long to have like a stable group meet pretty much once a week,
Right.
all through the school year. Like it's the most consistent campaign I've ever had,
Yeah.
and it allowed me to do a lot of sort of long form storytelling, which is quite rare. It wasn't just a string of one shots every 6 months.
Right.
And like the world and the setting that was kind of developed through that campaign was the basis, like the germ of the
Mm-hmm.
setting today. There's a thing where that was probably that world interpreted through the lens of 3.5 edition D&D, so it was a lot more sort of D&D like.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot more like high fantasy, whereas this Skald has like quite a sort of lower. Like there are no elves and dwarves in the game. You can only play as a human. It has less of like this fantasy word salad where there's goblins all over the place and there's dragons all over the place, and like because I wanted to tell something that was slightly more grounded. So even though it's very much a fantasy game,
Right.
it's sort of it's had a bit of the sort of high fantasy of that original campaign setting tuned down a bit more towards like Game of Thrones type setting. Yeah, absolutely so. But it started there, and a lot of like the names and the places and the history and sort of the world setting came from there, and it was a setting that was originally. I've always been very fascinated by like Frank Herbert's Dune,
Mm-hmm.
and I love the way that his world is sort of like this sociological fantasy or science fiction where he has made sort of this grand economy of how this universe is working, like how this clockwork mechanism of society is working in sort of like a macroeconomics kind of way. I really enjoy that, and it's definitely influenced my world building quite a bit, and also like directly influences the Skald setting quite a bit, whilst still being very much a fantasy universe.
Right.
Yeah, but there's something about that going on where it's like this empire that uses magic as sort of a tool of social control. Then there's a lot of sort of elitism going into like the magi being kind of like a ruling class and having sort of a monopoly on the use of magic, and then using that as a way of sort of consolidating and maintaining their power. There's something interesting about that. There is some real world analogy going on as well. There's a lot of like Holy Roman Empire stuff. Eastern Roman Empire, like post-Western Roman Empire stuff going on as well, like
a little bit of that vibe in the background, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit of like Byzantine history as well. So yeah, no, it's a mishmash, it's a melange, but yeah.
Well, then that raises the question: since it comes from a campaign, will we see any characters from the campaign in it? Do you want to call anybody out as this is actually a guy?
Actually not.
Really?
And,
okay.
No, yeah, that's actually very strange, and I have to admit it hasn't even like occurred to me before you asked the question, actually, which is very, very strange, because that's totally something I would do, but it was kind of never on the table. But I think the reason for that is like the gallery of people in the setting is very much sort of they have very much organically sprung up around the story that's sort of being written. Right. So there hasn't been room to add anyone, but yeah, now I'm almost a little sad that I didn't think of it. It's my mind in a way, I guess.
What's the favorite? Like, two of the things I know when I was watching you a little closer before I bounced off Twitter a little bit, but I saw you working on that I thought was really impressive. Is one, I saw you working on the lighting and getting things dark, and I kind of want to talk to you about that. But also the fog. How important was getting that fog in for you?
Fog was really important because it's so moody, and all of those little environmental effects in general are hugely important. It is one of those things where you won't notice it if it's there, but you often will notice it if it wasn't there. Mm-hmm. So getting the fog to work correctly has been something I spent a lot of time on. And then the thing is also like you have to. What I think a lot of people don't realize is that obviously we're going to swing into the whole Unity debacle and
I think
a lot of people don't realize is that yes, the game is being developed in Unity, but it's an extremely atypical Unity project where basically I coded my entire complete game engine inside Unity in C#, meaning that it's sort of it's almost more symbiotic with Unity. It just uses Unity very slightly. Mm-hmm. The advantage is that it gives me absolute full control of every pixel that is drawn on screen can be drawn like with pixel perfect resolution. Like it is it's not emulating being a pixel art game.
Right.
This is 100% a pixel game. It's not a case where it's really a 3D game and then you do some shenanigans with the camera to make it look like a pixel art game. This is being drawn like pixel by pixel in a rasterized grid.
Right.
And then only when the entire like texture is baked, it gets sent off to Unity, and Unity gets to draw it to screen. I allow Unity to draw it.
I see what you're doing. That's interesting.
Yeah. So So basically, instead of sending that complete texture to Unity, I could just as well have been sending it to Godot or whatever. I could even do like the whole DirectX thing,
Right.
do it myself. But Unity has a lot of advantages. But the point I'm trying to loop around to is that, so whenever you see something in a game like the lighting system or the fog or whatever, like it's not a plugin. It's something that had to be hand coded. Someone or like I had to sit down and do a lot of trigonometry to make this wave
Right.
complex that makes the fog look alive and move, and like it had to all be hand drawn. And then at the time when I was making the fog, I was very adamant that I was not going to have transparent pixels in the game, because we have a 16 color palette, and obviously if you have transparency, then you are showing more than 16 colors on screen. Now that's one of the things that I have allowed myself to change a little bit, because I felt that I needed to do something with the lighting system, and that means that we are blending color in kind of a different way. That means that in effect, even though every color is based off of one of the 16 colors, they can be slightly modulated on the screen. But when we were doing the fog, that was not the case. So to make the fog transparent, the fog has like this patterning that you will probably like, it checkerboard pattern to make it look transparent. And so there was a lot of fiddly stuff. It would have been much easier to just make the fog transparent.
Yeah, no, you got that old retro. That's how they had to do it. With you sort of stippled the texture to make it look. Oh, I can see through that. But
yeah, you have no idea. Like, I don't know why I ended up making the whole engine from scratch. Or like I know and I don't know, but a huge part of it is that I really enjoy running into these problems that I know that people were grappling with 30 years ago.
right.
And I kind of getting a taste for, okay, yeah, the solution back in 1990 probably was a little bit like this. It was probably like, like there was no transparency. So how do you make fog transparent when you have 16 colors?
Right.
And kind of having to think of that solution. And then obviously I have much more resources in terms of a modern programming environment and all of the system resources I have. But like, there's a lot of really, really cool things that it's very rewarding to hand code navigational algorithms, pathfinding algorithms, making it all from scratch, not just downloading some kind of plugin for Unity or buying it in the asset store. It's really, really fun. Making things like particle effects, building your own particle system from scratch to work within like a pixel art environment is really, really fun and rewarding. There's just so many of these little things that mean that like I don't regret and at least now with the whole Unity thing going down, I control the entire production pipeline, and that I programmed it myself, line for line, pixel for pixel. It's all me, which is hugely rewarding at this point.
Well, and yeah, like we said, and we'll get to Unity too, but that aspect of control over it, and no one can take that away from you. This is something I built. It's the way. Did you give yourself permission to do anything from the asset store, or is it all 100%? Unity's basically just the camera and.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good way of putting it with the Unity. It's basically the camera. The only thing I got from the asset store, which is like the only thing I didn't code myself, is that the game has an optional CRT filter that you can toggle on and off, and that is that I did not code that. So that's the only thing that was kind of important. It's such a specific piece of technology. And to make it work well, it kind of requires a little bit of. So, because the thing is, I'm absolutely not a Unity expert. I'm actually quite bad at Unity. That's why I code it all by hand. And so, if I was going to make a CRT filter, it would take an unproportional amount of time. So that's the only thing. That's the only line of code in this project that I didn't write myself. Which is, yeah.
When did you start coding? Not just this game, but coding in general.
I was. That's interesting because I don't have a comp sci or tech background or education. So I did something completely different, and then I started coding as a hobby actually at the age of 25. But then, like literally, I had absolutely no conception of what coding was.
Yeah.
A lot of people think I was probably kind of like one of those geeky computer kids when I grew up, but I wasn't really. I enjoyed gaming on my PC. but I was never one of those under the hood
Right.
kind of kids. That was not really my thing. And like I didn't have like a big brother who was like, yeah, no, who was still reading, because I got into it like in the very late 80s, very early 90s, and getting like computer magazines with these code projects in them, and that wasn't really a thing anymore in Norway at that point. Things had
Oh.
become very, very Windows, you know, like it
Mm-hmm.
was just there was just like a couple of years where we still had to use DOS, but then it was Windows 3.11, and then suddenly Windows 95, and then like that was kind of gone for a long time. But then I don't remember exactly why I got into coding. I remember always being very fascinated by it, but kind of resigning myself to thinking that, yeah, no, that's not like that's too long of a road to walk. I don't. There's no way for me to get into it. Like feeling that way about it. Like, how do I even start? But then there was like I remember there was some impetus in the early 2000s and later when a little bit like spurred on by like this indie wave in the early 2000s with Minecraft and going forward indie game that became there was just something in the zeitgeist, and then you had a lot of these kind of like block coding tools that came out. I remember Apple had something like that, and so like there was a sort of like a little bit of a push to bring coding into like the public consciousness. Game engines were starting to become a thing. That's something that's very strange for younger people to realize, that like 10 years ago or like 15 years ago, we didn't have a single game engine. It didn't exist. That wasn't a thing.
Right.
But like Game Maker Studio was starting to become very user friendly and very sort of feature rich. It was starting to become like a real contender, and that was like one of those early tools. And that's basically where I started, more or less, doing like coding in. If you can even call it coding, even though there is a coding environment in Game Maker, it's quite primitive compared to something like
what you're doing now.
Absolutely.
Well, I think sorry, go on.
No, and for a long time I was just like I was really into it as a hobby, not just game development, just like coding in general. I learned Python, I learned Java, I learned JavaScript. I had like a period where I learned web development, HTML, CSS, and PHP, and so I kind of like went through it all and really, really got into computer science. Read books. I took like a year of computer science at university as like next to my day job as like a night class. I very quickly realized that at that point I was pretty much more proficient than like there was no payoff to spending that much time doing it through university, because I felt that I already had the real world skills. And so I did some, and then I started like doing more, like I started doing a little bit of consultancy next to my day job, which was still not computer related at all. Did some like data science stuff, data mining, analytics. I had quite a bit of statistics in my university degree. That's almost the only sort of the closest thing to a computer science thing I ever had. So I had like a little bit of an statistic background, and so like doing a little bit of data science and working with Python and stuff like that was very second nature to me, I guess. But then I got the opportunity to start making games, and after a couple of years I got the opportunity to do it full time. So now I'm a full-time game developer and coder, which is huge.
Now there's a question. So you got picked up by a publisher. Oh man, I had it in my notes.
Yeah, in 2001 we signed.
Oh, in 2001.
Yeah, so it's almost 2 years ago now.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah, who was it you signed with? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. No, it's fine. It's a Swedish publisher called Raw Fury.
Okay.
And so Raw Fury is like they are one of the biggest, very small publishers. Like I don't know if that makes sense. They're not huge in the sense that like EA or like whatever, but they're and so a lot of people will not have heard about Raw Fury, but they are definitely growing, and they've grown immensely since I signed them,
Mm-hmm.
especially in their games catalog. So now it's like people still don't necessarily recognize the game Raw Fury unless you are an indie developer. If you're an indie developer, that's fine. But a lot of consumers, they don't recognize the name, but it's getting to a point where almost everyone has heard of at least one Raw Fury game.
I was going to say, I have several of these. I've got Kingdom, Bad
Exactly.
North, Night Call. I know I've got. I'm just looking through their catalog here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, and they have a really good. Oh well, obviously since they picked me, but like, I
Yeah.
would say they have a very well curated game catalog. Like they do a really good job at being an attractive publisher for indies. So indies want to work with them, and I think that stems from them being very, very sort of. They're very passionate about working with indies. Like they have a fantastic ethic and ethos in their company of sort of like being there for them, being very developer centric. They're very developer centric is a good way to put
That's
it.
so nice to hear. Because that's going to be my next question is like, how hands on are they with you? Or are they there as more of a resource and you can kind of tap them when you need them?
I think it. First of all, that varies from project to project, and it also varies with the timeline in the project. Because since I'm a solo developer and the only full-time hire in my studio, I don't have a staff. I'm the only one really, and then I have some freelancers working, but I'm the only one, and that means that to a degree, I would say they're fairly hands-on for certain things. But the thing to realize is that developers tend to, or like publishers tend to have very sort of distinct areas of responsibility. So for instance, with my project, they have they do the marketing analytics, the whole distribution thing is them, and I'm very happy to sort of hand it off to them.
All bet.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they are always I have final say in anything, like in anything. If I don't want it to be one way or the other, then I can kind of always veto it. But I'm super happy to just leave it to the professional marketing professionals. Should probably be doing the marketing.
Yeah. No, I'm just
Yeah.
curious about that because I have known several projects that have kind of gotten the publisher and then the publisher's gotten involved and you've just watched the project turn into something
Yeah.
so different from its original.
Creatively, Raw Fury has zero, or is exerting zero influence on the project.
That's good to hear.
Absolutely no influence in a negative sense.
Right.
If there is some influence, it is because because they're obviously playing the game continually, and I value their feedback because they are incredibly talented and smart people, and like they have a fantastic staff, not just like my team at Raw Fury, but the entire organization. They have their own developer studio, so we can kind of play game in terms of if we have some technical challenges, if we need whatever. It's a very well staffed organization. So if I want feedback, I can get it, and I fairly often do. But I've been super lucky, and that's kind of like that's a little bit of a cautionary tale, like for people who are watching, who are maybe considering going into game development, and or maybe even who are in development and who are considering approaching a publisher, is that like there is something where there exists a lot of cases where a publisher basically offers you enough rope to hang yourself with, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's no one who goes into any kind of project thinking, oh yeah, we're going to ruin this project.
No.
But at a fundamental level, you and the publisher have opposing goals in any project, and those opposing goals is that you want to do your thing, which is either make money or make art, or both, and the publisher wants to make money for themselves, not for you. And then the art of publishing is making contracts and relationship. That means that you can do both of those things in a kind of like a win-win situation, and that's what Raw Fury is just fantastic at doing. But a lot of publishers are not there, and I certainly had interactions with people who were sort of offering, who were keen to sign on Skald, where when I was sort of doing my due diligence and we were doing like the initial contract stuff, because not because I'm a very experienced contract negotiator, but I think there's something about like having not worked my entire like I've had a long career in other sectors before I came to game development. So you develop some kind of sixth sense, or you develop some tools that you bring into these situations, and you quickly realize that, oh wow, no, well, this is undermined, and like there's something going on here. This is not an optimal contract for me.
Right.
And then even like you have a few cases where you kind of like you realize that these are not for me, and like there were a few cases where I tried to like push them on it a little bit, and where I realized that, okay, these people are willing to say almost anything to get me to sign, and that would probably be a disaster. So I don't think they're bad faith actors, but I don't know, like some of them are definitely approaching like the bad faith.
Right.
Yeah, you have to be careful when you sign a publisher. So you really have to do due diligence. You have to spend a lot of time talking to people who have already worked with publishers. You have to really look at the projects that are in their catalog and try to sort of get an assessment of like, how did these projects turn out, and look at all of the projects. Do they have like a sub catalog of Chinese porn games? Like,
just for an example.
yeah, just randomly throwing it out there. No reason why. No, but I mean, like that's definitely a thing. Like, look at their lineup of game, like the game catalog, and think like, will I be happy to have my game standing next to this game? As I said, talk to other developers. That's really, really important. Try to really like dig really deep. Ask them exactly about like, get them to go off the record. Ask them like, what were the exact amounts?
Right.
How tranched was it? Like how did the milestone plans look? How was your relationship with your sort of business developer, or like the producer, like the lead producer? Like, you really, really have to dig into that, because it's so easy if you're a struggling developer and someone dangles a little bit of money in front of you. It's so easy to bite down on that, but that can be really catastrophic for a lot of projects. So I did a lot of research, and but I was also lucky, I think, that I managed to charm my way into the Raw Fury family, because I wouldn't like that. That was my dream publisher, and I got them.
And I just want to sort of add to that. Like, I can say, like, that's not, guarding yourself against publishers isn't something new. Publishers haven't recently become something you gotta. And I'm thinking of specifically like a game, Knights of Legend, that came out from Origin. I don't think most people would say Origin was a bad publisher, but that game needed to be at SSI. It's one of those where the catalog for that game belonged over here, and I think they would have gotten better support, and a better game would have come out. And so you got to try and make sure you're matching up with the right team, because
100%. And it's good that you say the thing, because both you and me, who are kind of interested in like game history, we know that like publishers have always been controversial, and there is every reason to be careful with publishers. But I think it comes back to what I said initially. I think that a lot of people are maybe naive in thinking that their publisher is now their best friend and someone who will do anything for you. You have to realize that at a fundamental level, no matter how much you love the people you are working with directly, there is a point where the dollar collapses, and their chief financial officer says that you have to whip this project into shape within 3 months, or we're cutting it from the catalog because we're at the brink of bankruptcy. Like, there's some real realpolitik, real world financial stuff going on at every publisher. And that's why they're able to do what they do. But, that can happen quicker than you.
But that means you can't spend 14 years building the game. It's you've got a deadline here. Let's go. So balance what you want with that. On a similar thing to this, now, before you got with the publisher, you did run a Kickstarter for Skald.
Yeah, we did absolutely. That's what basically sort of the project had already started before the Kickstarter, but that was sort of one of the stepping stones up to getting to a point where we could approach a publisher, even like develop a minimum viable product that was suitable for a publisher. And it's also one of those things where, oh, it's my eternal guilty conscience, because we're so far overdue. Like, I think we're almost 3 years overdue with the project, and thankfully, I think what we have been doing right with this project is that I've always been very, like, I don't think there's anyone who is doubting that this project exists and that it's going to come out. Like, I don't think anyone thinks this is vaporware or that we walked away from the project. And so that's basically what's saved us in the life of our backers, I think.
Yeah.
But obviously we would have liked to be more on time, but but I mean, like, at the other end, like, then it wouldn't be the game that it is. And we've also, like, honestly, we have stumbled into a lot more funding than I had originally hoped. Funding that has been, like, not in the sense that we found pots of gold, but people who are willing, like, we have been running into quite a few cases where people have been saying, we're willing to put more money into this project if you're willing to make more out of this project. Like, and obviously we have to go with that, obviously. Like, when we hundreds of thousands from Raw Fury to continue working on the game, obviously we're going to do that instead of pushing the game out early.
I think a lot of end users get confused at that, because they're like, okay, you wanted 50,000, you got 500,000. Why does that make the game take longer? Well, because it can.
That's what it comes down to. We were, like, originally when we were making a Kickstarter, I was making a game that would have sold 2,000 copies on Steam. I would have been fine doing that, but that means that would all been like a side project. I would still be doing my day job. I would go back to doing my day job. But now we are obviously aiming at a completely different sales figure, because we have the opportunity, and I have the potential to build something that can last a lifetime. And, like, the only thing that I've been very, very clear, and let me restate it here, and I've said it, I will say it to the end of the world: if there is any backer who wants out of the project, who feels that they are sort of being short served, whatever, who are not willing to wait, we refund you immediately, no questions asked, no bad feelings. Obviously we have the money. We don't want, if you walk around and you're not happy with anything, just let me know, and you will get your check and a pat on the back, and you will even be welcome back if like there is no I know exactly that we are overdue and everything, but, like, this is going to...
I think the thing that saves anyone who's overdue, and it's really simple. It's communicate and be honest. Let us know, I'm here, this is pushed back, we got more money, we're building something extra, we hope you'll love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as you do that and don't just run off and hide and tell us someday, then most gamers, not all, but most of us are willing to be like, okay, take your time. I'd rather have something good than something now. So
absolutely.
I've already got too many games on Steam to play.
So I'm not alone.
No.
And let me tell you, that's probably one of the, like, the one of the things you kind of miss with making games is that it is a lot of fun making games. And large degree it's more fun making them than playing them, but but also it's good that it is that way, because you will never have time to play games again, really.
Right. It sucks it up. I have to do a little bit here and there just to sort of pull that creative energy back into me, because I pour it out and I'm like, I need to feed on something after a little bit. But no, I'd rather be in code tearing something apart. Like, why are my bullets not spinning? Like,
exactly. So basically, what I have to do, which it sounds like a luxury problem, and it is to a degree, but I take time occasionally during the work day to play certain titles. I don't have time to dig deep, but I will typically, like, I took a couple of day offs to play Baldur's Gate 3. Obviously, played the alpha of the new Rogue Trader game coming out. Or it was a closed beta, not an alpha. The closed beta, because literally there is, like, like, it is research. It literally is
Mhm.
research. It sounds like a bad excuse you tell your wife to be able to play games.
I'm working, honey.
Exactly. But it is research, and it is hugely important because
Yeah.
some of the games they are really like within this very narrow niche
Hmm.
thing of computer RPGs. They are very sort of cutting edge, and there's a lot of like interesting tiny little systems and implementations of stuff where like there are dozens of changes in Skald where it's based on me playing one of these modern isometrics and going, yeah, I really need that in this game. And the latest example of that is something that I haven't revealed yet, but people will be seeing it on the screen now as I talk. Is that the game used to work such that when you came within like the correct distance of an energy, combat would launch, and then you would start from basically your party would pop up around you, and you would start combat. But one of the things that I was like really enamored with in the Rogue Trader game is that when combat launches, you get like this superimposed grid near where you were standing, where you can kind of manually place all your guys before combat starts.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's like it adds a whole new dimension to combat, because then you can see, okay, what's the initiative order? Who do I place here? Okay, if I place it like this, that means that my rogue will be able to get into a flanking position on their first attack and get a backstab attack in. Like it adds so much to it. And I would never have put it in if I didn't play the Rogue Trader closed beta a couple of months ago. And I'm super glad I did, because that's just like one of those things where, such a huge.
I don't know if I want to suggest something or keep my mouth shut.
I've already been in the game for all I know.
Do you have like a surprise feature, like the party gets surprised and you don't get to place them?
So currently, it's not in the game. It may very well be at the time that the game launches, and in particular, it may very well be because you have these overland random encounters.
Mm-hmm.
And they are being polished quite a bit as we speak, because that's one of those things where the combat doesn't happen, like the combat obviously is not happening organically. It's happening like you're being placed on like a smaller map that pops up,
Right.
and that's probably the only case, or maybe not the only case, but yes, absolutely, that's definitely something to look into.
Okay.
Having players be surprised. The reason, it becomes too. I'm not going to go into it, but it's not currently in there, but it could very easily be. It's a day of work. There are so many things at this point that are just a day of work. So,
and that's why I was like, I don't know if I want to say anything this close to being done, because for me it would be one of those. If someone said that to me when I'm like staring down the barrel of finished, I'd be like, shut up. The last thing I need is one more thing. And I'll want to do it. I used to work next to a guy, and we sort of had like two adjoining cubicles, and he would just lean back and go, it'd be really nice if we had a tool that did this thing. And then he'd lean forward again, knowing that 15 minutes later I was going to shut everything I had down and build that tool, because
exactly. Now, and like the problem is that, or not the problem, but the advantage is that since I have complete control of my engine, it is very fast to make changes. But there are some changes that if I make them now, it will require a complete retesting of everything in the world. It affects so much. So, for instance, just because there might be some tech heads out, or people who are into like the design aspect and project management aspect. So let's just do this example then and say, okay, what about player surprise? And then there are two implementations. One is where this is a general feature, meaning that it can happen anywhere in the game. So if you are moving around and you come across a pack of rats, there is a situation where you are not aware of them, and then they get the surprise on you, like during normal exploration.
Mm-hmm.
That means that if that is the case, it can happen in absolutely every situation where there are enemies placed on the map for you to find.
Right.
Not random encounters, but like these set encounters where there are groups of enemies set up. And that leads to some strange logic that we have to think about. So first of all, it means that it affects absolutely every combat. So if there is one of them that could be broken by this, like there are hundreds of them already, maybe there is one hidden down in a dungeon that the playtesters don't find that will break when we do this feature. So it's very it's already quite sprawling. It means that we would maybe in some cases manually have to go through and look at all the combats like in the editor to see, is there something here that doesn't make sense? And then there might be some triggers that are firing. Maybe as combat launches there is some dialogue that pops up. Okay, but does that account for the fact that the player can be not aware of it?
Right.
Like, does it account for the player not? So as you can see, this is like a cascading thing where it becomes infinitely more complex than you would think already. And so the other alternative is to have, because the other type of combat is, as I said, it's when you are moving on the overland, you occasionally get random encounters, which are combat encounters, and they are more formulaic, because then we know that the party and the players are being placed procedurally on a map that is 10 by 10 tiles. It's very sort of small, self-contained. We can control every sort of aspect of that. And then we can do bulk testing. If we say that surprise can only occur in these encounters, it's not perfect. It would be nice if it could occur everywhere.
Right.
But if we do it like this, we can probably test it all in an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if we do in the other way, at this point, we won't really ever be able to test it.
Right.
We want it with the feature being significantly untested.
Right.
So whenever people are like asking me, well, but couldn't you just? The thing is that I could, but it's there are a lot of moving parts that a lot of players don't really. Consumers aren't privy to. So not that the idea is not fantastic, but you at some point you kind of have to just agree that, okay, this is a Skald 2 feature, which is something we say.
Is there any idea that you really feel bad got cut?
Yeah, the thing is, when I started making the engine, there's always been, and I've been very transparent about this. It's something I've always said in interviews, and so there's always, like, the business plan of the project has not necessarily, or has never been to do like a one-hit wonder, right. Or like do this game and have it do as well as it can, and then move on to something completely different. The long-term plan has always been to develop technology and tools, and also like a proprietary IP that I can use to develop more games.
Mm-hmm.
So that means, and that's also a big part of the reason why I spent so long like making the engine from scratch, is that I wanted to have the possibility to sort of build upon it. And so there is a sense that I've kind of built a Ferrari, but we're driving it in a demolition derby, like, or I'm using a Ferrari to commute to work, because there are more features in the engine than the game is really showing off. There's a lot of sort of systemic features with things like we could do so much more with factions. There are factions in the game, and we use it as a mechanic, but we could do so much more with it, and like world reactivity. This is very much like, there is some systemic features in the game that are very much like Bethesda-like, that we could leverage more, but that I'm not able to leverage in this game as well as I would like to. Like, we could do a lot more. There's a lot more like Skyrim type. And that's not something I'm saying because I think Skyrim is such a fantastic game, but it has some things going on. It's probably the most selling RPG of all time.
It did something right, yeah.
Like there is at least, as I think a lot of like programmers and designers can look at these games and be amused by features that other people miss. Like this whole thing where, so like the engine is. So long story short, the engine is much more powerful and feature-rich than we will get the opportunity to show in the game. Meaning that there are a lot of things that we can kind of hold back, or that we have to hold back and leverage more in upcoming titles, which is a luxury problem, because it's not like the game is not worse for it. The game is better for being more focused in a sense. There's no reason, because there have been a few cases, and there is still a few cases in the game where a feature that I thought was going to be very widely used in the project, and being used so rarely that it comes off more as a gimmick. You know, I'm not going. People can figure it out for themselves what these features are, but it's like one of those features where when I made it, I was certain that was going to be like a cornerstone of how we made the game. Yeah, and that's not going to be in there. And the other thing that's not in the game, and that's always been like something we could implement, but that I just had to make a decision, is that we don't really have day-night cycle functionality in the sense that like NPCs move around and go to bed and stuff like that, because the game is so narratively heavy and there's so much dialogue and conditional scripting and stuff like that. There's a lot more of that than like it's more similar to a game like Baldur's Gate 2 in that sense than it is a game like Ultima 5, for instance.
Right.
Yeah. So like. There's no way we could put that in the game. It would require a huge engineering team to not like technically implement it, but to on a code level, but to sort of enforce it in the game world. Yeah, like making sure that like, okay, here's this dialogue where a person is telling you to find that person on the corner of that building. Well, but what if that person has gone to bed? Did we remember to account for that in the dialogue? Okay, we have to get back to the writer. Hey, writer, can you change this? Oh no, we can't do that because the artist has already drawn the person and he has a building as a background.
Right.
Well, what if we don't meet him in a like? There is so much stuff like that because. Yeah, getting back to the point that this game looks quite old, but it is really quite modern.
Yeah. Last old school mechanic I gotta ask about.
Sure.
Food? What's up with food? Tell me about food in your RPG.
Yeah, food is one of those features that I know, like it's in there, and honestly, at this point, it's still almost a little bit on the drawing board. Like I haven't made the final decision on the functionality of food.
Okay.
But I can say this: food is not. It's not like there's no food clock in the game, and there won't be. Yeah, because well, no, I don't think there will be, because I don't like that you have to. So when you have 6 party members, it's kind of annoying when you constantly have to keep feeding all 6 of them. If there was a food clock in the game, it would have to be more tied to. There would have to be some kind of automation with it, like where people would just eat if you had food. But the thing is that, for cosmetic reasons and for like storytelling and world building reasons, there are a lot of food items in the game, and there's cooking food recipes, simply because we want to be able to like it makes the world so much more colorful. Yeah, and I wanted it, so I get to have it because I made the game. And so basically what I think will be the feature is that it will be tied to the resting mechanic in the game, where getting basically the way it does in Baldur's Gate 3 and the Pillars of Eternity games, where like getting a full rest requires you to be able to feed your party. So there is something going on where like when you rest, you have to like, okay, you need 40 points of food at least, and then you can put it all in a pot, and then you eat it, and then you're ready to go. And if you have less, then you will rest less, and if you add a little bit more, you will maybe get a little bonus. And then the plan is that some certain food items will also have, like if you have prepared this special meal that you made at a crafting station and you eat that, you get a little bit of fire resistance, for instance.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, like a little bit of touch like that. So it's not a huge primary mechanic, but I know like food is already in the game. I just need to land exactly like the exact
how it
way.
Feels. Yeah, because food is one of those love-hate things. Like you said, it can add a lot of color and it can add some different pressures to you as a player. But
so we have made I made a conscious decision to avoid a lot of the grindy sort of record keeping things in the game. There could be so much more of it, but it's not. We don't want it to be that kind of game.
Right.
It can still be very, very difficult if you play it on higher difficulty, but it's but I also didn't. Yeah, so the food. I think the food mechanic is kind of emblematic. I didn't want, because we could have lamp oil be an expendable resource. We could have water be an
Right.
expendable resource. So it's pretty easy to make everything become an expendable resource, but I think it would detract a little bit from the game. Instead, at least we've chosen to take the game in the direction where that's not necessarily. I try to make more. The thing that I try to think more about is that there should be some drains on the party that forces you to both rest in the field, and also at some point you can't rest in the field anymore. You have to go back to like a camp and rest properly. There needs to be some of these loops that kind of, okay, at this point we have, even if it's just to sell loot, like we have to go back and get rid of the point, like so that you can't kind of like, at least if you're playing it on normal difficulty, you can't just like rush
through
the game and rest spam constantly. You can't rest spam, but if you do, you will eat up all your food and you will need to forage for food, and then so there needs to be like this economy built into the game, but it can't be too taxing on the player either, because then it becomes a chore.
Adventuring should be the primary thing, but we do need to have you have a downtime so you can appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Before we hit this big topic, anything else you want to say about the game proper?
No. I mean, like, yes and no, because obviously, as you can tell, I can talk about this for 5 more hours.
I know.
Yeah. As long as my work is over.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so even though you did most of the engine in C# and behind the scenes, Unity is the engine that you kind of did for the camera. And today we're recording this on September 20th. Yeah. And recently Unity made some announcements. And I just, as soon as that happened, I was like, I have to talk to you.
I'm a little bit humbled that you chose me.
Yeah.
But I have a Unity project, and I'm also, as I said, relatively close to release, so I'm absolutely affected by it to some degree, and I mean all of us Unity developers are. So for context, the thing that happened is that Unity announced that they would be changing their pricing model, both that they were removing an intermediate tier in their pricing, because they had like a tiered pricing model where you could be either like a private user or a plus user or a professional, I think it's called, and then they removed the middle tier, meaning that it is now quite expensive per year. It's much more expensive.
Yeah,
$2,000 per year. For me, that doesn't really change anything, because I have the funding to pay. So for me, that part of it is not really almost even an inconvenience. I understand that people need to make money. Corporate is gonna corporate. I understand.
Yeah.
But the bizarre thing, which is unprecedented, like I've never heard about something like this. This is completely out of the blue, and it blew us all away, is that Unity has also said that they are going to be charging a per installation fee.
Right.
Which is as bizarre as it sounds. It makes basically at the root means that they will be charging developers 20 cents for each time their application is installed.
Right. Not purchased. And a lot of people got confused about that. Not purchased. Installed.
Yes. Which is bizarre. It is as bizarre and as unenforceable as you would think it is. And then there are some caveats, meaning that so basically what I think the Unity is trying to do is that they are trying to capture a bit of that revenue that huge games I don't know what the biggest game made in Unity. It's probably some kind of gacha game or something like that, but like they're obviously trying to capitalize on the fact that a lot of the Unity is running on a lot of machines all over the place, some of them in the millions of hundreds of millions probably, and they are trying to sort of siphon off some money from that. And so the caveats that they have is that they start the counter from January 1st in 2024, and if you are on the professional tier, which you should be if you are, which a lot of people, which I am, it doesn't start. It only counts installations above. Is it 200,000?
If you have the professional, it's $1 million.
It's 1 million, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that means that for me and my project, it doesn't really affect me because I have like I don't have a free game.
Right.
If unless there is some like shenanigans going on, people are most likely buying the game for a set sum, and then they are installing it a couple of times. So even if they do it 5 times, it's just $1 for me.
Right.
But I will be able to pay that because if that is the case, I will have sold 1 million copies,
Mm-hmm.
and I am living on a tropical island. In that
Right.
case.
I'll give you your dollar, Unity.
Yeah, I will buy Unity. If I sell 1 million games, I will buy Unity.
Right.
But the point is that there are a lot of game developers who are making games that are free. That
Right.
don't have a premium model where they don't sell the game. They can be literally free games, as in free beer, free lunch. People have made them out of the goodness of their heart. It can be a fan project. And then people will end up with huge bills in the worst case scenario. Because if you don't have the professional tier, it kicks in after 200,000 installation. Right. And 200,000 installations is not a lot if it's a free game.
Or even if it's a cheat, because Unity, or not Unity, Steam or Epic, they're going to take their cut first. And then you're going to have taxes. And then you're going to start paying these flat fees per install. And if it's very quick and easy to see how someone can actually lose money by making a game.
So just by hearing us to discuss this, it's easy for people. People should be able to understand that the point isn't necessarily the dollar amount at this point in time. It is the fact that it is extremely difficult to predict and prognosticate how this will affect projects to a degree where it is so dangerous at this point that, like, I do a bit of like I do some like on like freelance game development coursing at the local high school. Like I have like a program that I run where I get hired in a couple of weeks a year and I teach kids to make games.
Yeah.
And I will not only will I not recommend Unity, I will actively recommend them to stay away from Unity because it is so dangerous. Like talk about, as we've said with publishers, talk about giving people enough rope to hang yourself with. This is a really, really volatile and dangerous situation that can be very, very hard to predict. And you risk up getting like a backlash from like in the way that tax authorities would sometimes do in the worst possible ways, where it's like you inherit money but you end up losing money, or like you know, like those kind of like Kafka-esque idiotic things. And the most important to realize thing is that with this move, Unity has shown itself to be like almost the point of being like an irrational actor, because it's like the Darth Vader thing where it's like, pray I don't alter the deal any further.
Well, it's altering a deal. It's applying the fees retroactively for up to a year, changing the terms of service so that it retroactively applies, then deleting the old change of terms of service so it's harder to prove. My big problem was, they said they're going to count installs, and people asked, how are you, what are you going to do about piracy? What are you going to do about install attacks? We got it. We've got a proprietary black box that we're not going to tell you how we get the numbers. And it's like, either you're putting spy software on every user's computer to know, or you're making it up. And I don't care which. I don't want either of those things from you.
So the bizarre thing is that this play feels so poorly conceived that it is like this decision seems to have been made like in a boardroom, like someone shot from their hip, saying, I mean, like, this is bizarre. No matter how you turn, because what is absolutely certain to happen is that someone is going to get a bill from Unity that is so high, and that they are saying there is no way this is correct. We will sue you because this is either we have connected to some kind of malicious,
Yeah.
like install bombing,
Yeah.
or there is something wrong with your accounting software, because there is no way this is correct. We are not paying this bill.
Yeah.
And then you have like a class action lawsuit going, like whatever. Like there is no way that is not the end result. So it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Like I can't even.
As for the, it coming from the execs, not only like the thing that really drove that home for me is most of the exec board dumped a bunch of stock right before this announcent. Like they knew.
Who is John Riticelli, who is the CEO.
Yeah.
He dumped 6 days before. He dumped 2,000 shares in Unity, like a huge part of the portfolio, which is also beyond bizarre. And then it turns out everyone else on the board did it.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, no, but these were pre-programmed sales, which you can do, which is like Emperor's New Clothing thing of kind of like, oh no, it can't be insider trading because this was programmed months in advance.
Right.
But don't tell me that they all
triggered just the day before,
synchronized dumping their shares in a company that was about to shoot itself in the foot. It is so beyond bizarre how this has turned out.
And it's when you look at it and you look at who the CEO is, this John Riccitiello, who used to work at EA, and you look at the plan, and I'm sitting here going, this looks exactly like microtransactions and purchasing tiers that you would get from, like, buy this for the 20 cents an install, get the, premium tier, get the game of the year tier, get the ultimate edition. I'm like, you are trying to take retail sales ideas and shove them onto developers, and it's not the same beast. It's not the same market.
No, absolutely not. So I guess like for anyone who is listening to this and who is interested in it, I would say that if you are considering going into game development, or if you're in an early phase of a project, you have to get away from Unity, unfortunately. There is, in my opinion, there is nothing they can do to redeem themselves unless they roll it back and change out their complete, like their entire management structure.
Correct. Yeah.
I am so, like, even if they roll this back, I am so afraid of what's going to come. This shows their intention. This shows what they are willing to do, and also how managed they have to be to get to this point. Because that's what's important to imprint in people, is that it's not that, oh, Unity is now so expensive, I don't want to work with it anymore.
It's not the money.
It's not the money at all. It is that Unity is so batshit crazy in doing this. This is one of the most consumer hostile moves from a software company ever, maybe in history. Like, I'm having a hard time thinking of another example. Honestly, like, microtransactions and loot boxes has nothing on it.
This is such a different level of messing around, because at least with a loot box, you can choose to open it. If I've sold you something and you open my loot box 5 times and I get the bill,
even if Unity said that, hey, we want to make more money, so now we have to do rev sharing. You have to pay us a percentage of your revenue. That would suck, but it would be completely. You would be 100% able to work within that scope, because you can kind of budget for it and say that, okay, Unity is taking a 4% cut. We can deal with it. We can
I'll budget accordingly.
And if my game doesn't make money, I don't owe Unity money.
Right.
But now they've set up a situation where your game can not make money, and you can still owe Unity money.
Right.
Which is terrifying.
Or I was thinking like Steam refunds. Guy grabs it, downloads it, refunds it. You now owe Unity 20 cents.
Pirating is also a huge thing.
They've got it figured out. Trust them. We've just changed the terms of service and tried to hide what we did. Trust us is the takeaway.
And this is also what you said, like, initially, like, if they do have a black box that detects piracy, it means that Unity is stealing data from you. 100%. Because how on earth is Unity going to track that this game has not been purchased on a DRM-free site, that it's not a GOG copy? How do they know that?
There's no way.
I can't even I don't know how would the engineering even work unless you are like somehow sniffing what, like, okay, no, we haven't sniffed you buying this game yet, so you can't possibly own this game. Like, and if that's the case, that's a whole other can of worms. Jesus Christ, what a shit show this is turning out to be.
It really is, right? I've never, and now obviously everybody watching this isn't going to be completely in the know of it, but I can say I have in my entire life never seen an entire community turn on something instantly. And you'll watch people on Reddit and they'll be like, oh, that's just Reddit being mad at them. And then people on YouTube, oh, it's just YouTube being mad at them. Oh, it's just Twitter being mad at them. No, it's everybody. And if you go to their stock page, the stock reports are all about how they're tanking their stock.
Absolutely.
Everyone has just turned on them instantly. Absolutely. And it's still radio silent on what's coming next.
Yeah, absolutely. And the shame is that even though I use Unity, like I use Unity in my own way, which is very different from what other people do, but I still really enjoy working in Unity. I Unity is a fantastic tool. I really enjoy the fact that it allows me to work with Visual Studio and C#. Because I am one of those people who enjoy doing C#. I like it as a language. So if I was going to go for another platform, it's critical that I can do C#. Or at least like it is at least like it. Yeah. So like I would probably continue doing Unity for a long time if it wasn't for this. Unfortunately for this project, it's not possible for me to get out at this point. Like Skald launch with the Unity backend, there is no way around it. But financially, it doesn't make a difference to me. But I would have liked to be able to say "fuck you" to Unity, and I would have loved to be able to say I was going to launch on Unity. No, I'm not. But it's going to require too much time at this point. Even though the engine is quite portable, I think we could probably do it quicker than I am afraid of. But it's a level of risk that obviously I'm not
worth.
Able.
No, know the engine; it's worth it. How long have you been using Unity? Like
I've been using it for maybe 4 years now. Okay. Yeah, so like since I started making this game, it started a Unity project. So.
Just to sort of drive home, you're going to throw away 4 years of experience in Unity to go somewhere else next. I have 12 years with Unity. I'm never touching it again.
Exactly.
And it's mind-blowing to me that it's just that fast to me. Like, well, I guess I'm learning something else.
But the advantage I have here is that I feel stuck at Unity because I have not really I have been my interaction with Unity is basically working in Visual Studio and then pressing play and then occasionally making a build. That's my the complete level of interaction. I'm going to, if I remember it, I'm going to take a screenshot of how the project looks in Unity. It's like there are 4 objects in the hierarchy.
Oh wow, that's nice. That's nice. Like when I do my Unity stuff, it's not that. I lean heavy on the engine.
Of course.
Do you have an engine you're eyeballing for next? Like, are you thinking?
Yeah, I do. I haven't really done like the technical due diligence, which I will obviously have to do. So this is with all kinds of caveats.
Yeah.
But the thing is that Skald is so self-contained that if this game does so well that I'm not necessarily scrambling to get the next title out, which can absolutely be the case that I end up having to scramble. Like if I end up with like 6 months of runway, we will just have to see what happens.
Right.
But if I end up in a situation where I have time to pick an engine, I'm actually leaning more towards doing something like Monogame, where it is the lowest footprint. It's not even an engine really; it's just like an environment. And that's simply because everything is coded from scratch, and Monogame is completely C# based. So I suspect that it will actually be easier, first of all, to port the game to Monogame rather than Godot. And Godot doesn't really like it. It would love for you to use GD script more, I think, than C#. And so like Monogame would probably be the best.
Definitely for you, I think. I think you won't find too big of a jump to start getting the graphics, because my first game dev stuff was in XNA, which is
Yeah,
what model
yeah,
game came off of, and
yeah.
I was building tile-based RPGs in there, and it didn't take too long to get that up and
No,
going. I have a
no,
feeling you won't
no.
feel a struggle on that. I am eyeballing Godot myself, but I don't like nodes. I don't know why. Something about
Exactly.
the node structure. I'm like, I don't get
Mhm.
this. I don't like it.
Mhm.
But I might
But
try
but
it.
I but I think if I was going to recommend someone who was new at game development, who
Hmm.
didn't have a preference, who could do anything, I would probably say Godot
Yeah.
100%. If they are kind of like looking for a something that goes up to double A in
Hmm.
terms of like production value, if you are very very like if you're not necessarily a coder, if you don't enjoy writing your own engine from scratch, if you want something to make
Right.
games, and if you're happy working with 2D games, Game Maker Studio 2 is also a wonderful tool
Yeah.
that you can make fantastic 2D games with. But there is like a ceiling on it
Yeah.
that makes me very apprehensive for people who are looking for like a career in game development. And maybe I'm pissing a lot of people off. I do love Game Maker Studio,
Yeah.
but it's a lot like your skills are not necessarily transferable. Whereas the nice thing about working in Unity is that you learn C# as well.
Right.
So you get a skill set that is sort of very transferable.
Hmm.
So yeah, but either one of those I think would be good, and obviously Unreal for people who are looking to get into sort of like more like the high end. If
Right.
you want something more graphically intensive, then obviously Unreal is probably
Yeah.
also
I
the
wouldn't
way.
recommend Unreal for a 2D thing, but it definitely
No,
has some
no,
pretty,
no, exactly, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, exactly.
3D stuff. Godot's getting better on 3D if that's the direction you want to go. The one I just heard about yesterday that I want to take a look at is Stride 3D. It's also
Okay.
C sharp. The screenshots looked very Unity esque.
Yeah,
But that is literally all I can say about it. Is I saw some screenshots and it's C sharp. I need to check it out yet,
yeah, yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah, and like it has to be interesting days for those other game engines. At
right.
the yeah, it has to be really interesting. And like I think the Godot community is going to really really swell. And
Oh, it is. Yeah,
yeah,
and that's the thing. Even if Unity rolled everything back and they switched their leadership out and got a couple of us who might have been going to go to
yeah,
stay rather than lose the history, you've still lost a bunch of your audience. You've still
you,
made
you
Godot stronger. You've made Unreal stronger. Like the Unity community will never 100% recover, and I got a feeling it's time now. This
it
thing's
would have to be a U-turn that was of the same proportion as the fuck up was. It would have to be like
right.
a turn in IT history,
Yeah,
literally. Like it would have to be. They would have to pull a rabbit out of a hat to make
yeah.
that happen. They would, and there is no way they can do
No.
it. So I think like if Unity survives, it is basically because they have taken enough projects hostage. Because that's
Yes.
what they have done. They have taken project hostage.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're screwed now. Should
Right.
have made your gacha game in another engine because now we're gonna. So if they survive, it's because they already have people who are too deeply enfranchised. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think Unity is so toxic now that their their acquisition of new consumers will be
Yeah.
so low. It will be yeah.
I think that's what's really going to drive it home for them, and it'll be too late. I do want to make sure we stress like people who are putting out Unity games,
Yeah,
they're either okay or they're trapped, and I don't bear them any ill will.
of course not.
The people who work at Unity, I have, from what I've seen from the stuff from them, they also are just as mad as us. Like
Yeah,
this is not.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think this is an excellent time for both of us to be the adults in the room and say that at no point ever should you be doing like don't be an
Harassing
asshole.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, these people are trying to make a paycheck and they had
Hmm.
absolutely nothing to do with the decision.
Right.
And also, like as you say, with the developers, remember that the developers who are stuck behind in Unity, they are in the worst possible case
Right.
because now they're stuck with an abusive spouse that you have to like.
Right.
Really, so the only people who are deserving of your ire in this situation is like corporate management.
Yep.
At this point, this is
Yeah.
like they are the ones who are causing this, and
Hmm.
you never have license to be an asshole to people on the internet. There
Right.
you go. Yeah.
That's rule 0 of gaming. Don't be a dick.
Also life.
Yeah,
Also
or life
life.
too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Yeah, I desperately wanted to get your take on it because I was like, are you going to be one of the people who's like, yeah, I don't care. I'm not going to make $1 million. Or are you like, no, this sucks?
It really does suck. Unfortunately, it's not going to sink my project in any way. Like
Yeah.
But it's also like one of those things where potentially I will be getting checks from Unity for years.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the checks are very small, it's like it's an administrative burden. If I quit game development
Mm-hmm.
and I do something else for 20 years, am I still going to get checks for like $3 from Unity?
That's what I've wondered is like, what happens when you stop?
It's bizarre you don't stop. Do they own up your life now? And
Yeah.
the worst part is that I have no recourse. If I take my game down from all the platforms,
Mm-hmm.
if the software is still out there, like just thinking about it is blowing my mind.
Even if you pulled everything, it's retro, so people can still keep one. They have it. They've earned it.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's so messed up.
we had like so just to reiterate to people how insane this is. We had like an open beta that was a standalone application on Steam.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there anymore because we took it down. But obviously the software is still on some people's PCs.
Right.
And there is no way for you to get this, but some people already have it. That means that potentially, like I could still be getting checks. We're never going to sell or 200,000 people
Right.
are not going to know it. Obviously,
Yeah.
but technically, that could be the case.
Yeah, even if you port it to Godot right now, all these old things that live on people's computers.
Even if I delete it from my computer, quit game development, quit my company, but the application is still out there.
Right.
And as far as I understand it, there is nothing keeping Unity from saying, hey, it's still being installed.
Yep.
1 million people in China installed this yesterday.
Right.
But it's like, and that is the level of how insane this is.
Right.
So if that was not already clear to people, then just like wrap your head around that.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it's such a slap in the face. It just
it's insane. It is unenforceable.
That's the other problem. Like how either you're spying or you're making it up, but either way, can't enforce this. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up at because they can't keep what they have, but they also can't afford to lose face rolling it back. So they're going to do something stupid, and it's just going to be worse at the end.
Yeah, I don't know. There is some conspiracy theories going on that they are like that this is some kind of massive thing where they are trying to manipulate. They're trying to force a buyout, and it is a conspiracy theory, but it's at this point everything is so insane that the exact conspiracy theory is that there are certain parts of the Apple ecosystem who are so dependent on Unity that if Unity was to go bankrupt, Apple would end up acquiring Unity instead of allowing it to fail, because that would have huge consequences for. There was like a certain part of the Apple ecosystem. I think it was tied to VR or something.
Okay. Yep.
And at this point, this case is so insane that even though it's a conspiracy theory, you have to stop asking.
Why not? Yeah.
What is the end game here?
Yeah.
Because you couldn't almost do a better job at tanking the stock prices than you have done right now. So this is just.
Well, yeah, and in some of the forums, they're like, "I hope Microsoft buys it." I'm like, when you're eyeballing Microsoft as the hero, things have gone way out of control.
Oh my god! Yeah, that's it. It really is.
Yeah, when Microsoft's what's going to come in and save you, you have gone too far.
Oh, through the bush. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So can I just before we wind down, just to put it back to games?
Yeah, I was going to say let's wind us back to where we were, and what else do you got? But
I was just wondering. I was interested in what you felt about Baldur's Gate 3. It's and also Starfield. Like those are the two. This is a big year for RPGs, and it would be
Yes.
interesting to hear if you have played any of them and what you thought about them.
I've just started Baldur's Gate 3. We had I had to finish Tears of the Kingdom on Switch, which
Okay.
is I kept getting Ultima 5 vibes from Tears of the Kingdom with the underworld and
Really?
the balloons and the shrines and
Hmm.
you're kind of like trying to rescue different cities from an oppressive force outside. Like it really had. There's a missing monarch. Like it just hits a lot of the same beats as that, but sort of a modernized open world thing. Obviously, it's not one to one, so someone's gonna be like, they're not the same thing. I'm not saying they are, but we did
Sure,
just
sure.
start Baldur's Gate 3, and if you've played anything from Larian in the past,
Yeah,
especially like Divinity Original Sin or Original Sin 2, this is
yeah,
that jacked up even further. This is a company
yeah,
that just keeps doing better and better and better.
yeah.
Starfield's on like most Bethesda games, I will end up playing.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you gotta go to Burger King at least.
I'm gonna end up playing them.
You know.
I don't know why. Like if you're like, do you like Bethesda games? I'd be like, no. You gonna play
Yeah,
it? Yeah, I'm gonna play it.
yeah, yeah,
How
yeah,
about you? Have you
absolutely.
played either of these yet? Are you?
I actually haven't tried just to do Tears of the Kingdom. I haven't tried it yet because I haven't the time. And but
It will
really,
suck you in.
yeah, I'm gonna keep it in mind what you said about the Ultima thing because it absolutely makes sense. But Baldur's Gate and to do Starfield first, I have not played Starfield yet, and I've been watching Let's Plays, and it looks like a bowl of oatmeal to me. It looks so boring. I can't even watch Let's Plays of it. That's not because I'm such a fine schmecker or whatever,
Right.
but there is, and I totally get that some people love the game. Absolutely, I love it if you love it. All the more power to you.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about it where I feel that like this is just a boulevard of missed opportunities in kind of in a sense. Like it's just so it feels so bland.
That's how I feel about Bethesda games. Is they give you like
Yeah,
5 or 6 different mechanics. Like, oh, maybe you want to do crafting, maybe you want to do
yeah,
exploration, maybe you want to do
yeah,
combat, and they
yeah.
give you all these opportunities, but they're all an inch deep. They're
Mm,
all. You really
absolutely,
can't have a good tactical Bethesda experience to really take combat to that next level. Or crafting
absolutely.
isn't like, I don't know if you ever played a game Star Wars Galaxies.
No, no, I don't think so. No.
Um, you had to mine resources, and the metals and plastics and things you used to put into your guns and armor and
Yeah,
stuff would
yeah,
have very slight variations. So
yeah.
crafting was actually, you're really looking at your materials, you're really designing something, you're putting something together to maximize what
That's
you want
interesting.
out of it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah,
That said, because how they kept it fair so that somebody didn't just get in all the best minerals and you couldn't do it, is the minerals would rotate every week
okay,
at a random time.
cool.
So I got a call one time at 5 in the morning from my friend. He's like, "We got to go move the harvesters." I'm like, "I'm not getting up at 5 in the morning to move harvesters."
Yeah.
Like, no, you go do that if that's up for you. I'm going back to bed.
Yeah, exactly. But obviously, like there was something there to
Yeah.
capture to want to do that.
Hmm.
But like I think like Skyrim in space, I think that's the only way to put it. That's
Yeah.
the only, and if that's okay for you, fantastic. But it is nothing more, nothing less. It's Skyrim in space. That's what it feels like to me. It looks like it at least. So, yeah.
What is
But I
your
think
favorite game of all time?
well, I think we have to do BG3 first
Okay,
because
sorry. Yes,
that's
yes.
more important of the three titles.
Yes, it really is.
Yeah, it is. It is like, and I just have to say, just like preface everything by saying that it is a monumental technical achievement, so monumental that like I don't think people understand the logistics that goes into having a fully voice acted game with so much branching. It is like extremely impressive from a technical point of view, and I think that it's hard to appreciate the first time you play through because so much of the reactivity feels so seamless
Hmm.
that you're all thinking, okay, yeah, this was the way it was supposed to happen.
Right.
Like Oh yeah, I was supposed to look under that rock and find something. Talk to this frog. Use
Right.
talk animal. Like and just like understanding the level of engineering that went into making that game is mind blowing.
Well, and it's because they've been so iterative in their process, and they started with like Ultima 7 as a template, and they've just
Yeah,
kept building and improving and building and improving. One of the
absolutely.
things I looked into, because I was a little scared, Baldur's Gate 3 is so big. I'm like, how
Yeah,
bad was crunch? Like
yeah,
how hard did they grind their employees down? And he came out and he's like, look, I'm not going to say there was no overtime, but the crunch you guys are talking about, we
mhm,
try not to do that here. And I'm like, that is, and I haven't heard anyone correct him or anything like that. So far I'm believing that, which is even more mind blowing to me.
yeah, and it's also like I think Larian is probably one of my favorite studios, and Sven Vinke is definitely like he is a fantastic guy for the CRPG. Like he is
Yeah.
visionary. He seems like a very good guy and a very cool guy. So
That's
I
what
have
I'm
a lot.
hoping. I'm like, please don't be wrong on
Yeah,
that. You seem like such a genuinely good guy.
yeah,
Please
exactly.
don't make me sad.
Oh, exactly. I'm just like. But so far, I haven't heard anything to the contrary. So I think it is actually pretty cool. But
Yeah.
all that being said,
Mhm.
uh, I'm not a big fan of Divinity Original Sin 2, and I'm also not a big fan of the way 5th edition D&D comes out of the box. It's
Mhm.
too. It's like a pizza with too much filling on it. You know, like it's a dish with too much seasoning to me,
Mhm.
which is completely my preference.
Yeah.
And also to be a little bit like a tiny little bit like prudish, at least at launch, I think the game was too horny. It like even I was like, oh, you have to stop it with the horniness of it. You have to stop. I'm not interested. I don't need it in my like. I know that a lot of people like erotic role playing is big for a
Yeah,
lot of people.
it's part of it, but it doesn't
After
have
a
to
game,
be so heavy-handed. Yeah.
oh, it's too heavy-handed. It's too heavy-handed. So I'm I'm not the biggest fan, but as a designer and as a developer, I'm a huge fan. Yeah,
Yeah, that's it for me too. Like I'm gonna play through this thing if only because mechanically and systems wise, I'm just fascinated by these. Uh,
absolutely.
that was the original Sin 1. That was the thing that really got me is like I could, you know, throw down ice on the ground so people are
Yeah,
slipping and then throw a fireball so they take fireball damage, but that turns it all into steam and then I can electrify the steam and there's
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
this.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm like, God, you guys pay such attention to this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's super impressive. It's super impressive.
Yeah.
And there's just like there's so many levels on it that I really like think is really impressive. But like fundamentally, it's not really a game that like for me it won't go down as the best game. Like
No.
for me,
Yeah.
but it's I think it comes down to just like that. That is very much like a preference thing,
Mm-hmm.
nothing more. Huge amounts of respect for the people who have been
Yeah.
making this, like the entire all of it,
Mm-hmm.
like the process, the early access, the way they involved the community, the way they did testing, harvested feedback, communication, everything. Like everything about this project is super impressive, and yeah. So
Yeah. No,
hats
it's.
off to them.
I'm looking forward to digging deeper, but yeah, it is. It's just on a technical level, well done. Like,
Absolutely, absolutely. And also I think probably if I had to choose a favorite game, especially if it has to be like a CRPG,
mm-hmm.
I'm very, very, very close to saying Baldur's Gate 1 actually, which means that I am hugely enfranchised in the classic Infinity Engine based RPGs.
Yeah.
And that also means that for many, many reasons, I am maybe the most difficult audience for Larian to please because this game doesn't really have anything in common with the Baldur's Gate. It's a fantastic D&D
Yeah.
game, if that's what it's for. It's not really a Baldur's
I
Gate
really
game.
wondered why they did that, other than just hoping to round some people in. But I feel like you're gonna tick off fans more than you are gonna keep them.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking at this point. That I'm wondering if there aren't some people in Larian saying, why didn't we just call this Dungeons and Dragons, the video game? Like,
Yeah.
it didn't really have to tap the Baldur's Gate. It didn't seem to add anything to the game. They certainly didn't make a Baldur's Gate game.
Mm-mm.
Like,
Yeah.
in that sense, it is not a Baldur's Gate game. There's no one. If I didn't know the title, I would never see this game and think, "Oh yeah, this is
This
absolutely
is obviously the third one in the series. Why wouldn't it be?
It's just yeah."
No, if they had
So
called it like Sword Coast or any one of the other Forgotten Realms.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So, but I think it's interesting, and more than anything, I am just extremely happy to see such a resurgence in the
Yes.
RPG space, and that we are actually putting out games like Baldur's Gate 3 that are like, because Baldur's Gate 3 is not an uncomplicated or easy to like. It is a old school CRPG with crunchy, chunky systems.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like complex character creation, if you're like for normal people at
Right.
least. If you're not into if you've never played D&D before, I'm almost impressed that you get into it, the game,
Right.
so
Mm-hmm.
I'm super impressed at what they're doing for
The numbers just
insane, insane.
insane. I would not have expected these numbers. I'd expected about half this. Like,
Yeah,
uh, and I would have considered that a huge win at half. I'd
yeah,
be, that's
exactly. I would be
amazing.
surprised for half of those numbers. So I'm and to me, and like this is obviously discussions we've been having a lot with like my team at Raw Fury. Is also like it's not the worst time in the world to be launching a turn-based fantasy CRPG,
Yep.
because even though obviously you can never compare my game to Baldur's Gate, my combat system was absolutely inspired by sort of third edition D&D,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically what fifth edition D&D is, which is
Yep.
exactly what Baldur's Gate is. So,
Yep.
like, if you understand and internalize Baldur's Gate combat, you will definitely find similarities in the way the Skald combat system plays now, which is a huge bonus for me. So
Mm-hmm.
this is definitely one of those things where the rising tide is lifting all the boats.
Yes.
Yeah. So and what a tide it is! And now
Right.
we have a Rogue Trader coming out in December as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is just really really great. Yeah, I played the closed beta. It's a it is very much like for testing purposes only. It's very clearly an unfinished product
Right.
when you play beta, but it is still good enough that I feel that like this is also going to be a really good game.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing more from that. I haven't done too much with it, but
Yeah.
that one's gonna be good.
Yeah, no, I think it felt really fun to play. I really enjoyed because the combat mechanics are very XCOM like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, cover shooting, and I really enjoyed that. It's like
Yeah.
there's a lot of work where there's a lot of like targeting templates for your flamer or
Mm-hmm.
your machine gun, and you have to kind of like mine collateral damage or friendly fire, and there's a lot of that going on. And I think that's it's a really cool game. It's a game that I also felt. Very like as I said earlier, I took a lot of inspiration from that into Skald. So
You mentioned XCOM, so obviously you've played and had some fun with that. Modern or classic?
I played the classic one back in the day, but I was too young to be good at it. So
Mm-hmm.
like I have spent probably a lot more time playing the modern versions than I have the classic versions. But I'm very much aware of the classic game, and as I said, I certainly played it back in the 90s.
I try
So
so hard to play the classic because I love parts of it so much. I can't. The interface is killing me. I'm so spoiled.
exactly. Yeah. And I think today I would not be able to go back in to
Yeah.
it. Today it's at a point where this is like I don't have this in my fingers. It's not internalized enough.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, I know I can't even.
I want to so bad, and it's not there. And I know
Uh,
someone in the comments is going to mention Xenonauts, and I've played it, and it's
yeah.
good, but it's not XCOM. It's not. It's its own thing, and I like it, but it's really don't get that same vibe,
Yeah.
that initial vibe. So okay, so Baldur's Gate is your favorite RPG. Do you play other genres? Is there something that really stands out to you?
Yeah, I guess that like I'm definitely more in the strategy game space more than 3D shooters. For instance, I
Mm-hmm.
do play some shooters as well, or like to put it another way, I play most kinds of games,
Right.
And but I would say that next to CRPGs, probably strategy games are my thing. Like I still play quite a bit of Heroes of Might and Magic 3 when I have time off. I
Okay.
really enjoy that. You know, like games like that are really, I can definitely sink a good deal of hours into. Yeah, so, but there's been a lot of cool games lately. I was hugely enamored by the Subnautica games. If you're
Oh,
not, if
those
you
are so good.
they are insanely good. They are, in some cases, they are just like they are masterpieces.
Yeah.
In some cases, some of the things they do the best of any game I've ever played. And when I'm looking at Starfield, I'm just thinking like, at some level, this reminds me of Subnautica, but in all the ways that they fail to be anything like Subnautica. You know, like, because like obviously my dream game is like a game that feels like Subnautica but has the scope of
a
Starfield.
Real huge, yeah.
You know, like something like that.
Like what No Man's Sky promised and never quite got to.
Exactly. And to make a game that is so like enjoyable to play and in a sense relaxing, but also literally the most terrifying game.
Isn't that weird?
It is so bizarre, and the game loop is so beautifully crafted. It is like, if you are a game designer, you have to play Subnautica.
You have to play Subnautica. That is a must. Yeah.
Because the way that, like, especially in the early parts of the game, when like the game loop is so organic because it is tied to your oxygen level. You're constantly like doing this. You're going up to the surface. You're kind of resetting. There's no stress. You can't get hurt on the surface. And then you're okay. You plan out your move. You plan out your dive. If I go there, get some oxygen, dive a little bit deeper. How deep can I go? And then you go, and then you go. You execute the move. And you find some stuff. And okay, I didn't quite get there, but I can see how I can get there next time. Go up, breathe again. The way that's sort of like, and I've done quite a bit of free diving as well. Like,
oh, nice.
Yeah. So for me, like it feels like freediving.
Right.
100% feels like freediving, but it's also and freediving can be absolutely terrifying.
Well, I'm sure.
Yeah. So that's just the beauty of the game. And no, I don't know.
It delivers world building with saying very little and only at exactly the right moments. Like in the beginning, I would go down, and as soon as night would come and I'd see all the glowing fish, I'd be like, I'm going to just sit on top of my craft until morning. I'm not going down there in the dark. And it was completely safe, but like you do not feel safe.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And the audio design is
so good.
Not to mention the audio design. It's just, and the way they use it to kind of signal that, okay, something. I mean, it's mind blowing to me. It doesn't get enough credit. People love Subnautica, but still, it is. It's, if you haven't played it, play it.
Do especially if you're interested in level design and game design. Like there's little things they do, and push until you get deep. Because like there's one part where I'm going into one of the chasms, and the little radio voice comes on and goes, "This region has 7 of the 10 features that cause terror in a person." I'm like, you did not need to tell me that. I was already like knuckling my mouse. Like, I know how many are here. I'm scared out of my mind.
But there's something about certain games that are as good as Subnautica, because what I think is so interesting about Subnautica is that it is so good effortlessly.
Yes.
And so it's almost, you can almost forget to appreciate how well designed it is, because everything just emerges so naturally. Like when you're sitting there in awe, just looking at how beautiful the world is, or how terrifying something is, and you obviously. This is a very sort of cultivated experience. A lot of really smart people spent a lot of time making it, but it is completely seamless. At least that was my experience with it. Like,
it feels completely open world, yet somehow still guides you towards what you need to do next. Absolutely. The narrative is all show, don't tell. It blends beauty and horror of equal measure, where you're not. It's not jump scares, really, like what's about to happen most of the time.
Exactly.
You've pushed yourself into a situation, and that's the scary part. I've got X resources, and I'm going to spend X -1 because I really want that thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think I think it's an interesting comparison to make with a game like Alien Isolation, which also has a lot of sort of the same
Mm-hmm.
uh, design
Mm-hmm.
things, but between Alien Isolation and Subnautica, like I also really enjoyed Alien Isolation,
Yeah,
but it is a game that I get exhausted playing
I can see that.
because yeah, you know, because like I don't think the thing that Subnautica does so well is that the game loop is much more enjoyable. So it does. There is like a bigger difference between sheer terror and
Mm-hmm.
then this is just so nice, just like scuba diving in the shallows, picking
Mm-hmm.
sponges. So, but
Mm.
Alien Isolation is like always oppressive and scary.
Right.
Um, and I'm not saying that because I think Alien Isolation is a bad game.
No.
Alien Isolation is a fantastic game,
Yeah.
and it is probably the single best piece of Aliens universe
Yes.
media outside of the first two movies. Is
Mm-hmm.
my opinion. It's like
I
it is,
will agree with you on that. Yeah.
yeah, you know, like it is the spiritual successor of the first Alien movie,
Really
which is the
is.
sci-fi movie ever made, in my opinion. So,
I can see
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I can see that.
yeah.
I mean, I put the thing up there near it, but they're very different types of movies. But
Yeah, they are. They are. They are. The thing is also really, really good. But to me, the thing is almost more like a horror movie,
yeah,
like more straight up horror.
right.
But something about like the sci-fi-ness and the world building in Alien that I find so deeply, deeply compelling, and also like the
Right.
the set and sort of the costume design, the way that the casting of the actors, and there's just something about the complete package that is just so
You can tell they cared about every single thing on it. Like,
and they nailed it. They
yeah,
nailed it.
right.
It's like a perfect cocktail of design.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So fantastic, and
Yes.
made on a huge string budget as well.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. On that terror and pushing thing, the game Matt and I play right now is Phasmophobia, and it's you
Okay.
go into a house to try and figure out what kind of ghost is in it.
Mm.
And you go in the beginning, and you're probably pretty safe, or you can give yourself a grace period to kind of go around and do you hear spooky noises? Can you take a picture of a plate moving or something like that? But the
Mm.
more you go in there, the more stress you build up, the more your sanity goes down, and the more likely you are to get bit. So every time you get a little more tense, a little more tense, a little more
Okay.
tense. And then you can be done with the whole game in like 15 minutes, 20 minutes if you're playing on a small map. And if that's all the oogie boogies you wanted for the day, you're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to keep going, do it again. It's short, it's bite sized. It's kind of nice that way. But
That's nice.
mm-hmm.
That's nice.
Not every game can do that, but that one's nice that it gives you those little.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Oh well, I can feel my throat is getting sore.
I was gonna say your throat's getting sore. We just crossed the 2 hour part, so let me let you go and have your day back. And thank you so much for talking to us. I'm really looking forward to getting this up, and I'll let
It
you
was an
know.
absolute pleasure. It was an absolute pleasure. I really, it's as I said initially, it's really nice to finally get to interact with you.
Yeah, and we'll talk again on lunch, I bet. So,
Absolutely. I would really,
um,
yeah, I would.
okay. On that note, then, goodbye, everybody. Thank you for watching.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Big thank you to all of you watching, sharing, liking, subscribing, suggesting games, commenting on our videos, or supporting us on Patreon. We appreciate all of your support and look forward to sharing many more videos with you. Thank you again.